Well, since 2011, I think the issues of how much can we talk of a movement of the Precariat has become a very central question, because while in the past social movements developed, especially new social movements, without a direct connection with the debate on classes, since 2011, the movement on austerity have directly brought back the issues of which type of classes are mobilizing, which is the class consciousness that we can expect from these emerging groups, and which are the conditions under which they can mobilize. What we saw in the movements of 2011, 12, and 13, and until now, is the fact that more and more young people participate in the protest, that more and more these people belongs to a particular social and cultural groups. They have usually high level of education, but at the same time, they also have little perspective of finding a job, of entering in the job market, of building up what used to be considered a normal life, to get a pension and so on. So there has been a debate about to which extent these movements can be considered as movements of these particular types of social class that have been defined in different ways, in different sociological perspectives. What I've seen in my own research, using, for instance, surveys and demonstrations, but also protest event analysis and other empirical instruments, is that these movements are indeed characterized by a large capacity to mobilize young people. These young people are indeed in a special type of positions, not only in the labor market, but also in many institutions and social spheres that affect the development of their life. They have constituted often up to 50%, 60% of those who mobilized. But what I want to stress on the basis of this empirical evidence is that we shouldn't focus only on these parts of the precarious people. What we have seen, in fact, is in many protests a sort of alliances, coalitions of many social groups that are in conditions of precarization. So I would stress that it is not just the group of young and highly educated people without a perspective to entering into a secure position in the job market, but that all these types of protests have seen the convergence of groups that once were considered as very secure in terms of occupation, so belonging to the core labor market. Think about the demonstrations of workers in the industrial sectors that are more and more subjects to the threat or of dismissal. Think in terms also of retired people that have been considered as, to a certain extent, protected by new development, but that instead are living a process of increasing precarizations, because on the one hand, pensions are cut, often against any legal provisions. And on the other hand, the social services that are particularly important for senior people tend to be reduced. So industrial workers, retired people do also participate in this protest, and they used to be considered as non-precarious, but they are in a situation of precarizations. Additional groups that have participated in the protest massively, and that I would also define as undergoing processes of precarizations, are employed in different positions in the public sector. So not only private services are an area of precarious workers, but the public services, which used to be considered as an area for safe jobs, secure jobs, are more and more undergoing a process of precarizations of those who work there. Cutting salaries, reductions of the protections on the labor jobs, attacks to the unions, which also means reduced protection on the job once people are acquired. And in general, a large, disregard for rights which had been acquired in the past, which are sometimes also contractual rights, which have been unilaterally repealed. So this is a large potential of protesters. Very often the conditions of precarity affect also dramatically the everyday life of people who lose their jobs, lose their house, lose very often also the possibilities to get social security provisions. These people in many countries are starting to mobilize. In some countries, they have mobilized consistently. Their mobilizations took different types of forms. What I would stress is that the mobilizations of precarious people is for sure not an easy task. People are upset, people are indignant because they think their own rights have been denied unilaterally. They are indignant because they think that this neoliberal system is going beyond any respect for ethic and solidarity. But at the same time, I think there are many constraints and challenges on the capacities of several of these groups to mobilize. On the one hand, many of these groups are hyper-precarious, migrants, sometimes migrants without documents, women which are traditionally weak on the labor market. All these people are also difficult to mobilize because they are subject to blackmail, and because very often they have little time besides the time they have to invest in survival. But also there is a challenge related with what's used to be called class awareness. When you are in the conditions of precarity, when you are in conditions of unemployment, when you are sometimes in conditions of not being able to repay debt, the development of a collective identities is not something easy, because you have to overcome stigmata, which sometimes are internalized. And what I think we see nowadays is an attempt to overcome these challenges by developing new forms of mobilizations. Typically, the mobilizations of the, let's call them, weakest social groups in the society had been taken care of by what in social movement studies were called professional social movement organizations. So with an tendency to advocacy type of work. What we see now is that more and more those who are affected by precarity tend to take directly to express directly their voices. This is not the case for all the various and fragmented forms of precarious workers, but some of them have more resources in terms of cognitive resources, but also of relational resources that allows for the development of some innovative forms of organizations. Second, while the professional social movements organizations of the past tended to focus on specific groups and called for specific demands, I think that there is more and more an awareness of the need to develop collective identities, which goes beyond the specific categories of people without rights or with less rights than the others, and that are oriented towards reflecting on what precarious life means and how this can be addressed. There are various type of dilemmas within this type of organizations. On the one hand, some organizational forms, horizontal, networked, and so on, require a lot of investment in order to go beyond the most resourceful groups of the precarious workers. On the other hand, it is still an open issue to which extent one can develop an identity based on the idea of precarity, to which extent precarity is a condition to be overcome, and to which extent it can instead be say, at the basis of reflections on the development of new forms of work and life.